Bryan Kohberger, well, he thought he could outsmart the cops. Now, he allegedly killed 4 precious college students and thought he could get away with it. Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on today's Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
And opinions expressed in this podcast are those solely of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. We're glad to have you on board the train today. The crime train, that is. We appreciate every listener, and we're getting a bulk of new listeners every single week. It humbles us to think of the thousands of downloads. Thank you so much. If you're new to the program, or if you've just been one of those good, faithful folks that stays with us throughout these podcasts, we want you to know you are appreciated. We would invite you to reach out with a shout-out. That's right, reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. You can send your questions, suggestions on other podcasts, and even opinions, even though they may vary from ours. We welcome every one of them. Or maybe you just want to shout out and say hi. Reach out with a shout-out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, we'd invite you to go over to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. There you're going to find ways that you can support. You can become a badge, BADGE supporter for as little as $3 a month. You'll help this program, but more importantly, you'll help the heroes, the cops, first responders, and the military. Those folks are always standing in the gap for us. How about becoming a part of helping them? Do something to support them. Join the peacemakernetwork.com as a badge, BADGE supporter. Go to peacemakernetwork.com to do that. Hey, we're going to put both of those websites links on the show notes. All you got to do is just go down to the show notes, click on them, we'll get you right in there. You'll read on peacemakernetwork.com how we help cops, first responders, and the military. Well, we're back to this, this fascinating case where these precious college students lost their own lives by the terrible hand of a terrible, terrible murderer. Now, I realize I usually do not take this much time with a particular case, but this one, again, has been intriguing. By the way, I'd like to take just a moment to clear something up. Last week, it seems I got a little tongue-tangled. That's how us Tennessee people call the word tongue-tangled. We say tang-tangled. Well, I got a little tongue-tangled, and unfortunately, I mistakenly called the Moscow Police Department the Moab Police Department. Yep. You see, I've been reading about Gabby Peto's parents suing the Moab Police Department. I guess I had Moab on the brain, and I just involuntarily kind of slipped in Moab Police Department in the place of the name of the Moscow Police Department. Just kind of shows you we're human, doesn't it? I didn't catch it, didn't edit it out. I don't do a lot of editing. I like you to kind of hear it just like it happens with my mistakes and all, because we're all human. And we're just sitting down having a little chat about crime, are we not? So I do apologize to the Moscow Police Department, because I'm telling you, friend, they knocked it out of the ballpark. What a tremendous investigation. So again, apologies to the Moscow Police Department, and hats off to them, who did a phenomenal job in catching this murder. Well, it is a fascinating case. You see, it caught the world's attention. It actually ended up being a textbook case for law enforcement. Oh, yes, it had its sizzle, yep. You see, you have the setting on a college campus. The victims, Xana and Ethan, Madison and Kaylee, all very attractive young, vibrant students, living some of the best times of their lives, only to have their lives taken in the middle of a cold November morning by an unknown offender. Yep, it's the thing that sells true crime books. Hey, it would make a Lifetime movie, all of that and more, in the case of the Idaho College Murders. You see, my friend, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that this offender, he really thought he could get away with this crime. You see, this was just not a crime of passion. It was not just on impulse. It was well planned out, thought out. It even appears through cell phone records that he did surveillance on the people and the place. Yep, cell phone data now appears to show that Mr. Kohberger, well, he stalked the student's home at least 12 times in the run-up to the night of the murders. That's according to the arrest affidavit. The exact dates and times in these instances were not revealed in the documents, but all but one of them was in the late evening or early morning hours, just like the time when he struck. Now we're going to talk about how the offender just thought he might get away with this murder. But first, let's talk a little bit about the motive. You see, everyone wants to know a motive in the murder. Now, let me point out it's not absolutely necessary to prove motive in order to get a conviction. But ever since we were all children, we just have it in our own DNA, don't we? To ask that question, you got it. Why? Little kids want to know it. Why? Why this? Why that? Why should we do that? Why do we do that? Why do we do that? And even big kids, adults, they seemingly always want to know, why was this person murdered? Why kill someone? Now, in an earlier podcast, I mentioned a whole lot about the profile of this offender. That was before he was caught. I shared that the age bracket would be between the ages of 18 and 35. Well, he was 28 years of age. I mentioned that he would be a white male. I even said that he would probably be someone that night. Now get this. I said he would probably have dressed in camouflage and or black. I also said he would probably wear a face mask, even though most those around him would not be wearing one. You see, I said this to try to trigger the memory of someone who might have seen him that night, unaware of his actions. This was before he got caught. And my friend, all of this was on the money. That's on the money with this particular offender. My friend, he wore on the night of the killing, according to witness, all black, and yep, he had a face mask on, along with his quote-unquote bushy eyebrows. Now, I also mentioned that he would have some sort of training, maybe ROTC or other physical training to prepare him for this type of killing. You see, this type of killing was up close with a knife. He did not use a gun to kill, but he used a knife. Now, we all know now that he was a trained boxer. You see, he knew how to engage in hand-to-hand combat, and he was armed with a K-bar Marine-type knife. Now to the motive. All right, I mentioned that somewhere along the way he would have been disrespected. That's what I said in those past podcasts. Most likely by females. Well, one such female who knew Bryan put it this way. She said Bryan was bullied a lot. And she said that she never got a chance to say something to defend him because he'd always just run away. Went on to say, despite always performing well in school, he was often rejected and bullied by girls. And she believes that he may have internalized that, leading him to lash out and commit such a heinous, violent crime. And other former classmates, they revealed that Kohberger was heavy-set, and he was a subject of bullying and cruel taunts in the middle of school. Well, they went on to say the whole clique of popular girls made fun of him in school. Yep, they were the cheerleaders, the ones that every kid had crushes on. Another classmate who did not wish to be identified, that's what he told DailyMail.com, went on to say they literally tortured him. Girls started making fun of him in middle school. You see, my friend, these are the type of situations and incidents that will fester in some people's mind, will cause some people to have a very unhealthy persona about women in general. You see, the crowd that rejected him in his early years, well, that's the type of crowd that he allegedly brutally murdered in his college years. It is certainly a possible motive for this crazy killing spree. Now add to this, when it comes to motives, a grandiose feeling of superiority, that he could be one of the most successful killers of all. You see, people that kill like this offender, well, they can become serial killers and love the notoriety they get in the press. Just like the BTK killer, BTK, the one who would bind, torture, and kill, BTK. The BTK killer and others that sent clues to the press because they felt they were so good at what they did, that they would never get caught. Now, in a past podcast, I revealed how the Golden State Killer, he got caught. And I told about how he got caught. But in his own terrible onslaught of killing, well, he actually emerged as one at first who just raped only single women. However, after hearing and reading in the press how he, the Golden State Killer, was a coward because he never targeted anybody but single women, well then, he evolved. Started home invasions of both husbands and wives, and then eventually evolved from rapist to killer. Again, it was his, the Golden State Killer's, distorted pride that led him there. Now, in much the same way, I believe that this offender, Kohberger, not only had the motive to get back at the in crowd that disrespected him, but thought in his mind that he could be an infamous killer, like the BTK killer, the Golden State Killer, and even Ted Bundy. After all, he studied those killers, intensely. Now next, we're going to get into why he thought he could never be caught. But now it's time for what we call here on Charlie Crimebuster, our crazy crook story. Hey, thank you, all of you, that have mentioned that you look forward to these crazy crook stories. It's in the midst of a sad and the dark stories that we share, a crazy crook story. Now, you've perhaps heard of two men in a truck. They are movers. Well, in our crazy crook story today, we have two men in a pickup truck. Two men in a pickup truck. It comes from Brevard County, Florida. Two men in a pickup truck. Now, folks, you really can't make this up. Let me start again. Two men in a pickup truck with a stolen tag written on a piece of cardboard. They used that to serve as a license plate. Well, they were arrested in connection with multiple burglaries in Brevard County. That's according to sheriff's officials. Anthony Sosa and Chad Dulett, they were taken into custody Thursday, and they faced multiple charges of grand theft and burglary. You see, according to that probable cause affidavit, the pickup was spotted Wednesday at several houses there on Merritt Island where the burglaries occurred. And the Brevard County Sheriff's Office said, well, jewelry worth thousands of dollars, and a handgun was stolen from the homes. Now, one of Brevard County's most scenic streets, well, it isn't known for crime, but there was one resident, a guy by the name of Mark. He said he could understand what might attract thieves to the neighborhood. Home values there, well, it's into the millions. Now, the affluence of the area would make it enticing indeed. But in that neighborhood, there was just one road in and out. That's what Mark said. He said, quote unquote, it's too easy to get caught. And one of the homeowners there in that affluent neighborhood, they reported to deputies that the pickup, get this, had a piece of cardboard that read stolen tag attached where the license plate should be. Well, that pickup was later seen on the causeway there in Melbourne, was pulled over by authorities. People who commit crimes like this, well, they're not the sharpest tools in the sheds. That's what Mark told News 6. Now, the affidavit said deputies searched the vehicle. They found that stolen jewelry and the handgun right there in the pickup. And Sosa and Dulett, well, they were both convicted on passive charges of grand theft and attempted burglary back there in Lee County. So these are guys who've done it again. Well, folks, if you're going to rob houses, now, you probably should not put a piece of cardboard where your tag should be that says stolen tag. Kind of stands out, doesn't it? In fact, no one would even have to memorize your suspicious car tag or even take a photo of it for even a forgetful memory. Even a forgetful memory like some of us, well, it would remember the cardboard tag saying stolen tag. And that, my friend, is this week's Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook Story of the Week. So now it's time to talk about why this offender, Bryan Kohberger, allegedly thought he could get away with murder. First, we have his own distorted mental superiority. Now, you may think, well, how could he think that way? That isn't a superior way. We all know that it was reported that he was bullied and made fun of girls. Well, think about it. You may have already heard that Kohberger, yep, he was bullied, and he was a little chubby guy. We mentioned that earlier. But one year, during the summer school vacation, he left school that year, and during that summer now, he did two things. Number one, he slimmed down. Number two, he took up boxing. And there, my friend, he turned from being a bullied person to becoming a bully himself. He turned into a boxer. He would often pick fights with other people. He's now beginning to get some superior attitude. My friend, well, it turned an inferior complex into what I call a God complex. And he even took that to the point that now he could decide who lives or who dies, just like God. He did exactly that, my friend, when he killed 4 of those students, and yet allowed 2 of those students to live on that cold, early November morning. He was indeed playing God with his God mentality. So mentally he thought, yeah, I can do this. I can get away with it. You see, also, we do know that he had some sort of, well, he became the kind of person that became a little arrogant. It was Benjamin Roberts. He took 4 classes with Kohberger at Washington State. He told 48 Hours correspondent, well, he said that Kohberger seemed uncomfortable around other people, but he was very quick to offer his opinion and thoughts. He also added that Kohberger was, quote, highly intelligent and would try to impress people. He would describe things in the most complicated, perhaps academic way possible. That's what Roberts said. It was like he was trying to convince people that he knew what he was talking about. So he was prepared mentally. He had somehow turned that inferiority into superiority, and now he had an arrogancy about him. So mentally he was prepared to do this kind of crime. You know what, though? He was also prepared emotionally. You see, as with many of these type murders, he was most likely a pure psychopath. Now, the New York Times, they actually unearthed some online posts by Kohberger, and that was from way back in his teenage years. There, he would berate himself. He would talk about being disconnected from society, unable to find meaning in life, they said. He described an array of mental health challenges, including anxiety, depression, lack of emotion, and the constant thought of suicide. Here's what Bryan had said. He said, I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth. That's what he wrote on a mental health forum. That was when he was 16. And then he said, now get this. As I hug my family, I look into their faces. I see nothing. It's like as I am looking into a video game. You see, my friend, as I said in an earlier podcast before his capture, he's not the kind of guy that would turn himself in or who would kill himself out of remorse. You see, he would only kill himself like mass shooters do. Mass shooters who say, well, I determined when I die, not you. But never because of remorse. You see, I don't believe that he can experience remorse like most people. Just look at him now when you see him on some of the video shots and the film that you see on TV. Doesn't seem like he's very sorry at all about what happened. Next, we have to say something about his preparation for the crime. So now we know physically he's able to do this. We know mentally he has that arrogance about him that he thinks he can get away with it. And emotionally, he has absolutely no remorse. So here he is ready for this crime. Well, he was prepared. He may be one of the most prepared killers we know about, though not all along in that preparation. The Golden State Killer, well, he was prepared because, you see, at one time he was a cop, and that certainly helped him evade police for decades. Well, Kohberger, well, he worked as a security guard and was at the time of the murders working not just on a degree in criminology, but working on a Ph.D. in criminology. You see, while obtaining his master's degree in criminal justice at DeSales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania, well, listen to this. Kohberger, he studied under Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a professor of forensic psychology and criminal justice who's well known and teaches a course specifically on serial killers. She's well known for her studies regarding serial killers and spree murderers. And last week, we shared with you how he had taken a part in a study at his school where they sent a survey to criminals. They asked them things like, how did they prepare for their crime? How did they choose their victims? Even asked about their so-called feelings before, during, and after the crime. Other questions like, how did they plan to get away? Other similar things. You see, this guy, he took the time to study serial killers and criminals to prepare for these tragic, terrible killings. And he even displayed that knowledge before others. While described as a quiet and independent worker by some of his classmates, well, Brittany Slaveman said he was quick to come up with good ideas when it came time to figure out a crime scene. Showed particular interest in crime scenes. Brittany went on to say at the time it seemed as he was just a curious student. So if we thought that his questions felt odd, we didn't think much about it because it kind of fit the curriculum. And another student told the New York Times that Kohberger seemed interested in thought processes of criminals while they committed crimes, less interested in the social factors that might lead people to do so. He said that he believed, now this is what this person says, that Bryan believed that some people were just bound to break the law. They described him as a black sheep of the class, often taking other viewpoints, sometimes getting into arguments with his peers, particularly the women. Now, we also know, as we said before, from the affidavit, that he scooped out the crime scene, and the students list 12 times before he struck. Something I'm sure he picked up from his study of other criminals. So here we have someone who is prepared mentally to do this, someone who's prepared emotionally to do this, someone who's prepared physically to do this. So now we're going to talk about how he thought he was smarter than the police in the crime. But first, it's time for us to take just a moment to mention our courageous citizen of the week. Now, sometimes we forget that cops are citizens and people too. They have feelings just like all others. They have strengths and they have weaknesses, and unfortunately, they have to witness so much more than the average person. Think of how the thoughts of these cops that went to this murder scene there in Moscow, in Idaho, where the blood was so thick that it was running through the side of the house. My friend, they'll never forget that sight. They'll live with it forever. However, there are also times when cops become human in other ways. They're able to do more than just catch bad guys. And this cop, well, she did something that she and a family will never forget. An Orlando police officer on this past Tuesday helped deliver a baby in a vehicle along Interstate 4. And my friend, I can tell you from experience, Interstate 4 is one of the busiest and deadliest roads in America. And yet, Officer Courtney Burke, she talked to News 6 about her role in the delivery, saying she heard calls for help. Never expected what happened next. It was just the beginning of her off-duty shift near I-4. She saw a vehicle stalled along the road, and inside she discovered a woman in labor. She went on to say, I know this baby has to come out and has to come out now, so she started pushing, and she did a good job, Burke said that the lady who was having the baby was a trooper through it all. She did have no medication, anything like that, and all she had was the trust in me to help her out. And Burke, the officer, went on to say the baby eventually came out, though it looked discolored, perhaps because of the breech birth. She said she could tell that there was something in the baby's mouth, so she laid the baby down, began performing CPR, and then the baby started to gargle a bit, so I knew, well, maybe she's coming through. I started to clear out the mouth a little more. Actually, I felt her tongue move, and she said, okay, like, I got this. Well, afterward, the new mother and the baby, they headed off to the hospital. And Burke, she told News 6 she's thankful she was able to be in the right place at the right time to make a positive impact. She went on to say, I hope it's a story they can tell forever, because I know it's a story I'm going to tell forever. And my friend, that cop is Charlie's Courageous Citizen of the Week. Well, when it comes to cops then, how was it that Kohberger thought he could outsmart the police? Well, first, he chose his victims in a way that he thought the police would not attach to him. You see, he probably already knew that police always look at the family and friends as the first possible suspects. Even one of the victims' family's lawyers said that Kaylee, Madison, Ethan, and Xana did not appear to have personally met Washington State University criminal justice Ph.D. student Bryan Kohberger prior to the 13th of November slayings. That's what the Goncalves family told Insider on Monday. So, he did not know these people. They did not know him. It appears there was no personal relationship with the victims. He was even at another college across the state line. He thought that would give him distance from the crime. It would also mean that he would be committing his crime in a different jurisdiction from which he lived in. Well, you can imagine his surprise when police tracked him down through all those miles and broke down the doors and windows to arrest him 2,600 miles from the crime scene. Yes, they did. Oh, he also thought he outsmarted the police because he did not leave DNA at the crime scene. Appears that he was careful, though. As far as we know, DNA that was left, well, it was only touch DNA. However, seems like Bryan did not realize how far forensics have come in developing touch DNA. Now, he surely knew about genetic DNA and how that could catch him. Any serious student of criminology knows that today. However, it could not catch him if there was no DNA left at the scene, and he thought that he left none. At least we know, according to the arrest affidavit, that it was only touch DNA that they used in the arrest affidavit. Now, if there was more DNA there, well, the police are not telling us. Regardless, he was careful in not leaving any DNA. But that DNA left on that knife holster, they connected it back to him. And even though he may not have known whether the police had his DNA or not, he was still careful not to leave DNA behind. He even used gloves after the fact, even while out grocery shopping. He even put his garbage in a neighbor's garbage can, thinking he was smarter than the cops. Even though he didn't know it, they were looking at him, even then, when he was putting that garbage in the neighbor's can. You see, he also thought that he was getting away because the police were not releasing that he was a person of interest. How many times did we hear that they had no suspect, no person of interest? Even while they were saying it, they were connecting him to that white Hyundai that he was driving. He even thought, because he changed his tags from one state to another after the crime, that might help him get away. He would elude the police. However, they were already on him, well, like duck on a June bug. Yeah, he thought the police would not be able to connect him to the murder scene on the night of the murder. He even thought they were not going to be able to get me by my cell phone because I'm going to turn it off. However, he turned it off at the exact amount of time of the murders, and that proved more guilt. You see, there's a phrase we use in chasing the bad guys. It is called consciousness of guilt. He showed that in the way he turned his phone off during the crime, the way he changed his tag registration, putting the garbage in somebody else's garbage cans, wearing gloves while he was grocery shopping. Oh, the bottom line, my friend, is that while he spent his time studying criminals and crime scenes, he failed to study the inner workings of real police work. He failed to realize the commitment of law enforcement to catch a bad guy like him. My friend, let me tell you, while agencies may have turf wars over jurisdictions and some things, I'm here to tell you that all gloves come off when it comes to catching a killer. It is all hands on deck, including local, state, and federal, to get these terrible monsters off the street. Now, I've always been proud to be a part of the blue wall that stands between the good and the bad. But my friend, I have never been prouder of that blue wall than in watching the pursuit of this killer. In spite of the media pressure, they did not leak his name, but quietly and meticulously built their case. They got their man. And rest assured, my friend, they will win the prosecution. He did not outsmart the law. The law outsmarted him. So, my friend, this guy who thought he could outsmart the law, he did not. He got caught. And if you break the law and you do terrible things like this man did, you are going to get caught too. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.